Right, we'll make a start. So welcome, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us. My name is Neil Howman from 202 Communications, and I'm joined by my colleague, Netra Ghosh, who's General Manager Client Services at 202 Communications. So welcome, Netra. Thanks very much for taking time out of your morning, quite early morning, to join us for this conversation. We are going to kind of revisit something that Netra, you actually were one of the stars of a few months ago, wasn't it? A panel just before NAB on, media training, some tips for when engaging with the press. Seems like a long time ago now, but is it? I've lost track of time, Netra.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. That's very kind of you, Neil. And yeah, it was just the previous trade show, but it feels like it's been a long time. What, 4 or 5 months?
Yeah,
so maybe it's a good time for a refresher. That's what we're going to talk about today.
Well, we had IBC in our minds, didn't we? Because obviously people who didn't exhibit at NAB, it's been 3 years since they've had that opportunity to perhaps engage with the trade press, either in person or perhaps pre-show or post-show. We'll come to that a little bit later, but we'll have a chance to explore those as we go along. Just for everybody joining us, a little sort of the map of what we're intending to do. But before we do that, let me just give you a quick introduction to the environment we're in. We're on the live platform here, and what we would like you to do is stick around once Netra and I have finished talking. We're going to talk for about 20 minutes or so, and then we'd invite you to perhaps explore the environment with us. So essentially you can move around at will. I mean, for example, if I'm talking, most people get bored within about a minute, so they can go off and explore the environment, you see, at will. You're not locked into this. Obviously, you'd want to be back for when Netra's speaking, of course, much more interesting. But really, just to navigate the environment, we set up a very simple map for this particular conversation. You can either use the map on your browser, just click on the room that you want. You'll then be invited to leave the current sort of Zoom environment you're in and join another one. Or you can access the different locations in the map using the active rooms and users list down the side. So you can see at the moment, apart from Becca, we're all on the main stage for this conversation. That's it in a nutshell. So please stick around at the end. You will probably have questions, and you would also have experiences of your own when perhaps meeting the press over the years. We're also very honoured to be joined by Simon Tillier from Kit Plus. Welcome, Simon, in the audience, who is obviously a master of the video interview. So we'll probably come on to that a little bit later, and maybe pick Simon's brains from his perspective, from the other side of the camera, perhaps. Get his input as well. But please stick around, and we're trying to engender a sort of conversation here. So let's start the conversation with Netra, really. We said IBC, obviously, because it's 3 weeks away, Netra, but of course, what we're going to be talking about applies to any sort of engagement with the trade press, with the media. And when we were talking about the sort of subject matter for this conversation, we identified that there are really kind of 2 types of media briefings, aren't there? There's the sort of in-person one at the trade show, and then increasingly popular are the pre or post-show sort of online briefings. Perhaps you could share some thoughts about how they're similar but also different.
Yeah, absolutely, happy to. So of course, you meet the press at any trade show, not just IBC, any of the trade shows that happen through the year. Those are a certain kind of media briefings, and then there's a second category where you meet the press through the year, either more increasingly online on Zoom, Or, if you're meeting with them, say for, you've set up a meeting to see them in person. Maybe you're visiting the same town and you're just, meeting up. So there's a distinction between these two categories of press briefings, because at the trade show, everybody's time is valuable because we're all there for just a few days and we all want to make the best use of the time that we have. So generally, trade show briefings are briefer, shorter, to the point. Yeah. And what we've observed over time is that these briefings usually tend to bring up current discussions around new products or new solutions launched at the show, or a new trend that's emerging in the market, something that's new, that's interesting. Because when a journalist or an editor visits your booth, they don't have a ton of time to sit down and have a full briefing. Yeah. To have a sort of a longer, more in-depth briefing, we recommend doing either a post-show briefing or a pre-show briefing, where you block out a certain amount of time from the editor-journalist calendar, and increasingly, again, meet over Zoom or through a platform like this to talk about your products or solutions, at length, where Absolutely. You can go over, the background, what prompted you to release the solution, what are the exact features, benefits. So a more in-depth, detailed discussion.
Yeah. So it broadly gives you more opportunity to go in depth. But I think it's probably worth mentioning at this early stage that any opportunity to meet the press builds that relationship with that particular editor, that particular publication, and more importantly, it can also lead to identifying future opportunities with that publication that they've got.
Absolutely. Anytime you meet with the press, you're given an opportunity to build the relationship, Absolutely. To find out more, and to move your story a little further in the minds of the people that are listening to that story. So definitely, it's an opportunity to build.
Great. Well, and with any opportunity, I think the point, we could keep this conversation very short, couldn't we, Netra? It's just called preparation, and then we could say thank you, good night, and let people get on and have a chat. But obviously, they pay good money to be here. So let's dig a bit deeper into that. So seriously, the preparation, I think, is the key. So maybe, Netra, let's go back to the sort of beginning of that process and talk about it from your side of it, from the customer, the client, your company side of things. Yeah. I think it's most important, really, to work out what you are looking for, what you want to achieve out of that briefing. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I think it's very important to go into that meeting with a clear objective. Yeah. That we'll talk about talking points in a few minutes, but it's very important to bear in mind, again, that time is limited. So you need to make sure that you have your messaging probably written out. And also it helps to have prior knowledge of the person that you're speaking with. It's like going on a date almost, right? So you have to do a little bit of a background research before you actually go ahead and meet the person. So what we advise is that, read up the publication. Don't go into the meeting, completely blind, not knowing what the editor, who the editor is, what kind of areas he or she covers. What is the regional focus? Are they talking, is the target audience just, say, European countries, or is it more global? The more you know about the editor and the publication, the better you'll be able to tune your story and better the chances of getting coverage. So preparation is definitely a key thing.
Absolutely. I think the watchword is just, do as much research as you can. Yes. Has your company been covered before by this particular publication or that particular journalist? Do you have a sort of hook that you can get into? But Netra, I'm very interested, and sometimes I think it's sort of companies are the opposite. It misses them a little bit in the sense that you do have some control over the narrative. Many, especially in an in-person briefing, where, as you've already identified, time is very limited, the publication may well ask you for, three things that you want to talk about. Have you any thoughts on that? I think this is very key, isn't it? This
exactly, and especially at a trade show where you probably have 10 minutes of an editor's time. So it's really important to narrow down your messaging. I know, every company has a big story to tell. They want to spend as much time as they can with an editor or journalist, but it's really helpful to condense your entire story into 3 to 5 talking points. And this also helps in preparation, because if you have those talking points narrowed down and you have practiced it over and over again, when you speak with an editor or a journalist, you'll be, that much more comfortable with the messaging. So we recommend having 3 to 5 talking points narrowed down, probably even written down, if possible. And rehearsal is also key, because the more you talk, the more you practice, maybe with a colleague or with your agency, if you have one, the better you are familiar with the story and the better you'll be able to present it as well.
I couldn't agree more. Tapping into a former life of mine, I would say that rehearsal is everything. But obviously for the reasons you've already given, but basically this is quite an unnatural situation for a lot of people, and I have seen people unfortunately kind of freeze a little bit when a camera is pointed at them or somebody is sitting in front of them firing questions at them in whatever capacity they sort of tense up. So the first thing I would say is breathe, everybody, breathe. But I think the rehearsal, you get more familiar with the whole process, don't you? That you can be, you're recalling your 3 key points without having to necessarily think about it,
Absolutely. And especially for video interviews, as you mentioned, Neil, I think it helps a lot to practice a little bit in advance, or if it's at a booth, just making sure where you're going to stand. We'll talk about those tips in a bit.
We'll come on to the whole video process.
Yes, of
course. And as I said, we have the bonus of an expert in this area. Simon, get yourself ready. Get yourself into makeup and in your trailer, and we'll come to you a little bit later. Yes, I mean, I think this rehearsal thing is really important. We couldn't emphasize enough, could we, Netra, that use a friend, use your agency, and really work on that sort of constructive feedback. Are you being concise enough? And being concise, as we've already said, 10 minutes on the trade floor at IBC, and they're running late. You've got to be really able to nail those key points, haven't you? Couldn't emphasize enough how important the rehearsal process is. And that should come quite naturally after your planning and research phase, shouldn't it? So being concise, Netra, let's move on to actually the interview itself. So there you are. You're either on as we are now, in some video environment, and you've got a journalist the other end of the screen, or sitting opposite you. Just a few tips for that, for that moment. There are a couple of things you could share with us that would be helpful when you're just sitting opposite that journalist. You've done all your research, you've done your rehearsal.
Yes, I think it's important to bear in mind that every meeting with an editor or a journalist is an opportunity to build a relationship, right? So that's why you're there. That's why you're meeting this person. So, be yourself. I think that's one of the biggest tips that I can provide. And, while you are speaking with them, have a conversation. It usually is better when it's a two-way street, where, you're not just giving your solution and product details, and and the other person is just writing down notes. That's that's not an ideal situation. The journalist should be asking the questions, or you should be encouraging them to ask questions. And at the same time, this is also an opportunity for you to find out more about what this person, this editor is working on. What are the upcoming stories that they are going to write on, say, over the next couple of months? Is there a way for you to build that relationship to be part of those stories as well? So I think, that back and forth conversation is when the best media briefings happen. Like that's what makes the best media briefings. So that's my number one recommendation. And I think it's important to be a good listener for that conversation to happen, actually, because when you listen to the questions that are coming towards you, you are able to understand what might be going on in the mind of the editor or journalist. What's their exact focus? Are they trying to dig deep into a solution, or maybe they just want to know more about your company or the people? So you can make the time valuable and worthwhile for both of you if you pay attention to the questions that are being asked.
I couldn't agree more with the listening thing, because despite all your rehearsal, if you're an automaton and you're not listening to the question you're being asked and you're just hitting your 3 points like that,
yeah, that's not going to work.
It's kind of has a sort of negating effect on things, doesn't it? But you can still stick to the sort of key messages you do, but out of a conversation, it's much more engaging, much more likely to be building that rapport that we were talking about. Things like eye contact with the editor. The whole body language thing is very important, and actually even more important when we get on to talking about the whole video interview. But it is an opportunity. We can't say that enough. Use that opportunity. Take advantage of that opportunity. They may throw you a question which is just asked in a slightly more interesting way. And if you have that ability to respond in an equally engaged and interesting way, that will make a real impression on a positive impression on the journalist. I've found. I've seen it work in these sort of situations. Also, I just wanted to ask you, Netra, about the use of facts and figures and customer mentions. How would you most effectively deploy those in a conversation?
It's a very interesting question, because facts, figures, data points, PowerPoint decks, they work excellent in a longer briefing.
Right.
Let's say if you're meeting somebody at a trade show, I would stay away from those, because again, you have 10 minutes to tell your story. You don't want to pull the person to see a demo, right? That's unless, of course, come in and they say that, oh, well, can you show me a product demo? Then by all means. But yes, for a more in-depth, say, if you have 30 minutes from a journalist and you're doing a briefing via Zoom, absolutely. Share your PowerPoint deck. That would give them a visual guide to take you through the briefing. So and helps extremely if you can name drop a customer, or you can mention actual stats from your sales. Those are definitely good things to bring up.
Yeah, it's excellent advice. Actually, you've just reminded me, Netra, with IBC on the horizon, and just I mention this again, stress this again. Obviously, we're talking about IBC because it's 3 weeks away, but the sort of things we're giving you, hopefully you can use whenever you're engaging with the press. But I do know that there are a couple of journalists who spring to mind who have asked for a 20-30 minute sit down with a client at IBC. So that's a wonderful opportunity to either point them in the direction of various demos, or, as I say, provide them with sort of deeper information. But it's on balance, it's rarer on the show floor, isn't it? That amount of time.
Yeah, exactly. And then, what you can instead do is, say, if somebody has only 10 minutes, what you may do is follow up with them after the trade show is over to see if they want to have another chat, and this time probably, online, to talk a little bit more. And that's another, way to keep the relationship going, provide them with relevant details that they might use for a different story, and increase your chances of coverage.
Yeah, that's a great point, actually, Netra, about the importance of follow-up, whether it's a 10-minute engagement, you've had 20 minutes with them, you've done a video interview with them. Always remember to try and keep that momentum to the relationship going. A quick thank you note a week afterwards, and that was great. And if you need any more information, please drop me a line, and love talking with you and looking forward to the next time, and things like that. I think it's so important to stress that. Let us segue into the whole video interview. Obviously, many things that we've already covered here about your research and planning and thinking about your key points are just as relevant with video. But there are some, to my mind, sort of differences as well that are worth thinking about when meeting. And my little anecdote about people looking a bit like rabbits in the headlight, especially when a camera's pointing at them. So that's kind of a weird scenario for people. So again, rehearsal, practice, getting more familiar with it is important. Netra, I don't know, you must have facilitated, been present at a ton of video interviews over your time. I didn't want to say many years, because obviously you don't look old enough to have been working in this industry for 15, 20 years or however, but you must have some insights into what makes a good video interview and a bad one. I don't know if you wanted to share some of those.
Yeah, I know Simon's here, so I would love to hear his his feedback as well. But again, sticking to those talking points, because video interviews are even shorter, honestly.
Yeah.
So and if you have 3 to 5 minutes to describe a solution, it really makes sense to really practice your story and keep the narrative absolutely tight. At times, people get nervous in front of the camera. So one trick that I've used with some of my clients is that we just write down the main talking points on a sheet of paper, and we stand right behind the camera so that the person speaking can actually see those. Those are like cue cards, right? That's essentially what they are, and it would just keep the narrative going in their mind, and just helps them to be fluent on the camera. So that really helps.
Yeah. I find that 2 minutes on film, Netra, is a long time.
It's eternity, yes.
Isn't it just? And again, we're giving Simon a big build up here, but we're going to come to you in a minute, Simon. ask for your input on that. But the point about being concise that you mentioned, Netra, is absolutely key there, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah. I just wanted to talk a little bit about, if somebody points a camera at you and you're just doing a piece to camera, I mean, that's the hardest thing of all, in my mind. So I would say in your preparation, in your rehearsal, really be very clear about your kind of opening statement and the closing statement, what you're going to bookend your 3 key points with. I think that gives you quite a good anchor to how you're going to deliver the information very concisely. As I say, just looking into a camera is one of the hardest things, but the sense of practice, the sense that you're trying to convey that information to one person, have one person in mind. If you could have somebody just slightly off camera, if you're doing something on the show floor that you can direct your comments to, I think that's really helpful. Also, eye movement and any sort of gesture, like I'm doing now, is always exaggerated on camera. So again, I think that familiarity, if you can bear it, film yourself doing it. And you normally have, when people get to the end of it, you know, the camera crew will ask them just to hold it for a bit, and they're sort of like this, and then, you know, they instantly move, and it makes it difficult for the camera crew to sort of make their edits there. So I would certainly think about what you're going to do with your hands, and what you're going to do, and where you're going to look, and try not to blink too much. There's all these sort of things, but I guess they just come with practice and familiarity with doing it. Netra, I wanted to ask you, there are different types of interviews though, aren't there? I mean, if you're doing something on the show floor, you probably want to check first whether it's, you know, it's going to be a two-shot with you and the interviewer. Are they going to then film cutaways to your demos or your products? These are important things, I think, to talk through before the interview starts. Yeah,
absolutely, yes, Neil. You're absolutely, yes, could not agree more. We always encourage the video crew that's at the booth to take some cutaways of the booth as well. It just adds more interest to the video, I think, rather than just a talking head. And Simon is actually an expert on that. But yes, there are also times when you're essentially sort of in a studio setting where it's a one-on-one conversation and somebody's interviewing you. Yes, for those sort of interviews, Neil, what you mentioned with body language and eye contact, I think those are absolutely critical. Thank you for bringing those up.
Yeah, I think it's just trying to relax, and you only relax by practicing, I think, in doing it. Anyway, I've given him a big enough build-up. Simon Tillier from Kit Plus, welcome to this conversation. Thanks for joining us. Simon, from your perspective behind the camera, and I've seen you work a trade show floor. You're on a very tight schedule. You're doing a hall by hall. You've probably got, I don't know, 10, 15 interviews that you want to get one after another. I guess you would agree that, you know, just having a well-prepared person ready for you, able to do it is sort of a bonus for you and a big help, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I wasn't expecting to talk actually today, so I've been making some notes as we're going along, because we came to video production at trade shows by accident back in 2011 at IBC, where I had a shoulder-mounted camera for 127 interviews over 5 days, and it nearly killed us. And it always seemed odd to us in a video industry. Our industry was always very slow to adopt video as a way to convey their message. Thankfully, things have changed a lot now, and I think people, particularly over COVID, actually, people are much better at being in front of camera. You think 2-3 years ago, trying to get people to do a video conference like this would have been, and have their cameras turned on, would have been quite hard. Yeah. So I was just going to, and as you just touched upon now, there's I guess there's 2 or 3 ways that you're going to do the interview. It'll either be an interviewer interviewing you, or you'll be doing it direct to camera. But there is another way which we found quite effective as well. If you if you don't want, you know, if you don't want us to interview you, quite a successful way is to, for example, get the marketing person to interview the sales guy or sales lady, and then you're talking to a friend, you're talking to a colleague. You know they're not going to trip you up. You hopefully know the answers, and you can have a very good dialogue and probably a bit of banter and make it fun as well. We want to we want to try and get people to smile on camera. We want to try, and as soon as you smile, then the tension will hopefully release and you don't get that nervousness. And again, Netra touched on a point there as far as how it's going to be edited. What's it going to look like? Most of the time you want cutaways in there, because otherwise just looking at 2 people talking for 3 minutes is going to turn people off. You want to see what they're talking about. You want to see that camera or that box or whatever. So you've got to be thinking, or ask the camera crew, how are you going to edit it? Do you want me to tell you what cutaways to do afterwards? Do we want to agree them? Because often the camera crew won't know what you're talking about. They're shooting 80 of these over IBC. So they're not going to have they won't have a faintest idea what the model numbers mean. So some guidance on camera recorded after the interview's finished, it's really handy for the editor to watch, so he knows or she knows what you're talking about. So that's quite handy. You want to agree with the interviewer, if you're going to be interviewing a person, where the interviewee is looking. Are they looking at camera? Are they looking at the interviewer? So you don't have this awkward thing where they're looking at the camera when you're talking to this person here, because it's not natural. So agree where to look. If the interviewer has a handheld mic, agree who's going to hold that microphone, because we've often had the case where you hand the microphone and then there's a struggle who's going to hold it.
I've seen it. I've seen it.
You've seen it. And instantly then you've got to decide, okay, start again. I hold the camera, so I hold the microphone. So actually what we've started doing now is we've taken on 2 handheld mics, because people like to hold something. It's a bit of a comfort thing. So but that's not always the case. So agree, if you've got a handheld and there's only one of them, who's going to hold it. It's quite interesting that I think we've done just over 2,000 booth interviews since we started. The average viewing time for 2,000 of those, the average viewing time is 2 minutes 30.
Right.
So that instantly brings into 2 things really. If you've got a booth and you've got 3 things you want to talk about, do 3 videos. Don't do 1 video, because the chances are people watching it will never see the second and third item. Because they'd already turned off. Because they won't know that you're going to be talking about Y and Z. All they can hear is X. So do 3 short 2-minute videos rather than 1 long 6-minute video. So that's what we really encourage people to do. And along those lines, get in, don't waste time by saying, isn't it lovely to be back in front of all these people? We had a good meal last night. No one's interested. Get over what you want to say in the first minute or 2 minutes, and then if you've got time for a little bit of chatter, do that afterwards. Most people are, well, depending on what you're doing with the video, where you might just put it up on YouTube, people are going to organically find it by a search result. They probably haven't searched what was IBC food like. They probably searched what is Vislink showing at IBC. So they want to know what you're talking about. The other thing I was going to say, we've already covered it really. Body language. It's very easy to sway and not stand still. So we always say legs apart, firm feet, and deep breath. And
keep breathing, certainly, Simon. Simon, there was just one thing that occurred to me, and I've again seen this, and it's slightly embarrassing, and I won't mention it in detail, but it's thinking about where you're standing in front of as well. I've had clients stand in front of their key competitors' sign above their head. That's one thing. Or standing in an unfortunate way where you've got a long word, and it makes a more interesting word because your head's blocking out, or 2 words. We've all seen it, I think, but I think it's really important to absolutely think where you're going to stand.
I mean, a lot of that I think is the responsibility of the camera op as well. I mean, we're not ashamed or embarrassed to tell somebody you've got something between your teeth. You've got your collars up like this on one side,
are undone,
on the other side.
And all of that.
You've got to be blunt, and it doesn't. And they might find it a bit insulting, but they'd rather they were insulted at IBC than 2,000 people see them with something in their teeth on YouTube.
It's a very good point. I might just add that any self-respecting agency such as 202 Communications would be really on that on your behalf. Quick
I also hope that Netra will have her powder puff ready to puff the sweaty, because again it sounds funny, but you do get a lot of people on camera, mainly male, not much hair, the lights are gleaming on them, they're hot, and the light is just reflecting off their heads. And a quick wipe, or just someone to tell them, because they probably know they're sweaty, but they're too embarrassed to say, can we just hold on a second while I get a towel? Just say, look, you might want to mop your brow, you might want to.
We've done all that, Simon. We've done all that in our time, haven't we, Netra? I'm sure we've done the lapel collars, and I can remember doing all of them anyway.
The other thing I was going to say is again, this is it's not a minus thing, but it's more of a stand building thing. Thick carpet is the nightmare of videographers, because if you're trying to push a camera around with a with a set of wheels on it, and there's one very large manufacturer that has a press area on their booth. They've got a big enough booth that they have a press area, and you go around the back and you have all the products set up, and you can wheel your camera along. But you can't, because the carpet is about 3 inches thick, and you literally, as you're going along, the camera's structured like this. Whereas really, you just want as thin a carpet as possible. And also, you get some people that have invested in some really bouncy flooring, and when you've got a tripod and a busy stand, literally the thing is moving like this. So again, you want to try and find somewhere that you might have somewhere on your booth where you conduct all your booth interviews, which avoids your odd word or avoids seeing your competitor. So you might want to set up a video, because again, we do waste a lot of time when we arrive on booths with them deciding, where should we go? Should we go over there? Should we go there? Where would you like to go? I'm like, I don't care where you go. You tell me where you want to go. So, because to me, I don't care. All I want to do is make sure that we get the best possible production quality. Trade shows are notoriously hard for lighting, because you've got daylight, you've got tungsten lights, you've got flashy lights at the back. So it's very hard to get the subject lit as you would in a studio. It's impossible. And also you might have audio spilling over from another booth. So you want to try and think about that. And often you're not going to know that until you're at the show. So you want to have a quick recce round on day one, thinking, okay, look, if we have it here, Neil's going to look green. If we have it here, no one's going to hear Neil. So let's have it here. So there's, I think, trying to find out where you want the person to stand. And again, a really key thing is agree who's going to be on camera before the team turns up. Because again, you have all this infighting in the team. Oh, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. It's your turn. It's your turn.
Oh, yes.
Like, oh, goodness
again,
sake,
preparation is key. That's the messaging that's emerging from this discussion.
That's it. And I'm aware that we've gone a little over time, but Simon, they're excellent points. So thank you so much. And
I can just add one more, Neil. Just one more, which is our key one. We need diversity in front of camera.
Excellent point.
And that's what I'll leave you with that.
Yeah, it's such an excellent point. Yeah, what a perfect way to end. And the only thing I would say is that many people would applaud the fact if I was inaudible somewhere, Simon. So that might be a plus point, And green as well, maybe, yeah. And green, they would prefer that too, but or disappear completely. Simon, thanks so much. I'm bouncing you into that. I mean, we did give you a little bit of a build-up, to be fair. Netra, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. Great insights. You know that I turn to you for advice more than anybody else about preparing a client's, on the client side for things like this. So thank you so much for your input. Everybody, thanks so much for joining us, and please stick around. Explore this small little environment we've set up for this chat. Netra has a room, so if you want to speak to Netra about anything in more detail about preparing for media interviews, Simon, I hope you can give us a couple of minutes just to be there if anybody wants to. Yeah, sure. You further, but please share your own experiences of meeting the press, triumphs and disasters. We've all been there. It's all part of the knowledge bank. And I would just like to say that we have some content available from the live side of this conversation. What is working now for virtual events? I'm hoping there'll be a link in the chat where you'll be able to download all this. And thank you all very much. Please stick around and enjoy the live platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Thanks,
Neil.
Simon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.